Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Roger Beadle is an entrepreneur and business leader who is reinventing how customer service is delivered via the gig economy. After establishing several businesses in the contact centre industry, Roger co-founded Limitless with Megan Neale in 2016. Limitless is a gig economy platform that addresses some of the biggest challenges faced by the contact centre industry today: low pay, high attrition, and access to new talent. Previously, Roger and Megan helped to build one of the largest privately owned outsourced contact centre businesses in Europe before selling the business to the global conglomerate Hinduja Group. They were also founding shareholders of Semaphone, the leader in PCI-compliant security solutions for contact centres globally. Named a rising star at Deloitte's Technology Fast 50 programme, Limitless is a gig customer service platform combining crowdsourcing and AI to help global businesses address their biggest customer services challenges: rising costs, increasing attrition, variability in demand, and the need for diversity. Brands like Microsoft, Unilever, eBay, and Facebook are using Limitless Smart Crowd TM technology to connect with their most engaged customers and reward them for providing on-demand customer service that can flex in line with demand. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Roger Beadle, welcome to the Extrology podcast. Great to have you as our guest, and as always, appreciative of your time. As is customary with all things Extrology, we like to do a bit of digging around the Roger Beadle early years, if you like. So in order that you might introduce yourself to our audience, we'll start with perhaps where did you grow up, and therefore what was childhood like for you?
I was born in Kingston upon Thames in Surrey, and I've lived in that area all my life, and I've travelled quite a lot with work and business, but always kind of came back to kind of where the roots are. I live in a little village called Cobham in Surrey, in the UK, as this is a global audience. In terms of childhood, I was very lucky. Very, very stable family life. My mum and dad's passed away, unfortunately, but they were married 65 years, and working class kind of family, possibly old fashioned in many of their kind of ways. My dad worked very, very, very hard all his life. So did my mum. She was very a parent at home. And I had a very, very lucky, very happy childhood growing up, as I say, in the Surrey area. I went through state education all the way through A-level and then on to university.
And siblings, were you a large family, sort of brothers and sisters, that sort of thing?
Oh, yes. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yes, I was part of three boys, but I was actually the youngest by 10 years. So mum and dad had the first two, and then along came Roger 10 years later, so perhaps a surprise offering, but
but a very welcome one nonetheless.
Yes, I hope so. I think so. Definitely felt that was the case. So So again, slightly different childhood in as much as a 10-year age gap with my brothers, but that seems to have narrowed somewhat in older age.
And what about the heroes as a child? Who were the posters on the wall?
I love music, but it wasn't pop posters. For me, it was football posters. I was completely football obsessed. I played a lot of football as a child as well. Lucky enough to play not just for school and county, but also was with Chelsea schoolboys, and went all the way up to being an apprentice. So that could have been a very different path for me. It didn't work out. I didn't quite make the grade. wasn't good enough in the end, but I had a great time. So my pictures on the wall showing my age a little bit and my preferred club were Glenn Hoddle, who was a famous old Tottenham Hotspur player. So I think other inspirations kind of sort of later on, again, nothing too out there or original in this, but was kind of Winston Churchill. I've always been quite fascinated, just as a sort of an interest in the Second World War. I think my parents are slightly older, and they actually were children in that period. So I kind of have a different kind of perspective that they grew up through that throughout my life. So, but it wasn't necessarily a forensic analysis of everything he did or the decisions. It was more around completely fascinated by how he could galvanize so many people and this passion and focus to overcome that adversity and that kind of sheer tenacity. I mean, they are real traits that I just admire a lot. So I'm looking at that level when I think about that as an inspirational figure.
And that's an interesting point around the footballing story, because as I understand it, you studied business management and marketing at university. And one of my question inevitably might have been when you perhaps first recalled starting to develop an interest in business. But was there a sort of, there's a bounce back ability there in terms of having had a knock, albeit as I understand clearly, the percentage of those going through this, even to have made an apprenticeship would have been, I think is it less than 1% of academy players these days make it to professional status, let alone to Premier League status. So there was a bit of bounce back ability, but what was it that provoked or prompted the business management and marketing degree?
I will say that. I think just around in terms of a memory that was quite a tough one was that my father kind of had to deliver the news that I wasn't going to make the grade. And it wasn't because he was told to do that. That was his opinion, and felt that I was making up the numbers. And you can imagine how that felt at the time. And it was quite an uneasy period. But what's really interesting as you reflect as you get older is the respect that you have for your father making the toughest call and making the right decision. So I think from a business studies perspective, my dad was, as I say, he was a really hard worker. He was in the building and decorating trade, and he worked on his own, but with other people from time to time, and it just had that work ethic instilled in me. Interesting, even though Mum was a parent at home, she had these kind of little hobbies where she would buy and sell things. And before the days of eBay, used to do that at boot sales. And there people, they still exist, but I don't know. But and I used to get dragged along as a child, and my mum was just an incredible salesperson, and she would just really, make money out of all the old things and all the old tat. And obviously I was allowed to bring along some of my things as well to sell. And I don't know, just that entrepreneurial spirit and making some money. So that really kind of fascinated me. I also did, back in the day, paper rounds and Saturday jobs, again, showing my age. I think that was very much what you did. Washing cars, can you believe it? Actually, the children used to wash the cars in the old days. So again, showing my age. But I used to love that. And then I think from a real technical perspective, though, A-level was the first time I studied business studies. And I was, I was hooked then, because then actually I realized, this isn't just about natural kind of capability to sell something, buy and sell. Although I do actually think that at the heart of all companies, clearly that is a key benefit. But actually there was a lot to learn. I was fascinated and hooked on it from that point, and felt that I had not just an interest, but a real passion in that area.
So therefore, from a career perspective, you joined Careline Services, which was, as I understand it, a provider of outsourced customer service and sales solutions. You joined them in 2001, and as the executive director of sales and marketing, grew that business over the next 10 plus years from 2 million to over 45 million in revenue, with multiple sites across Europe, which is a phenomenal early career experience. A lot of blood, sweat and tears inevitably would have gone into it. But I guess what do you feel you learned from that experience?
Lots. I grew as a person. I was still in my late 20s when I first did that. So there was lots to learn there. I think I could tell you lots of different things. I think there was one particular thing, which I think is good advice, is that I often approach things. I was in a more selling capacity, an account management selling capacity in those days. That was my role. That was the team. I was one of the directors and owners of the company, but that was my kind of area of expertise and what I was bringing to the party. And often I would approach things very clearly about what I wanted, and I wasn't what I was bringing, what I was giving. So as a salesperson, you need to think about how can you add value to the person. It's the old saying of, you need to give as well as take, right? And I think, so I thought about, I think that's a key thing that it's easy to say. It's actually quite hard to to always make sure that you're thinking about that. And actually, it works very well. I think in terms of the industry, though, is where I learned a huge amount. Selling, I had done that previously before coming to Careline, but again, really hone the skills of understanding selling to enterprise, understanding the customer experience industry, which is where Careline was operating within, how enterprise buy, how the decision-making processes, the business cases, the challenges that they face, how to overcome those, how to sell, the methodology of selling, and actually, taking customers through a journey of the sales process. So lots of different learning and training and development through that period.
You were a founding shareholder in Semaphone in 2009. So where did the idea and vision for Semaphone stem from?
Well, as one of the founders, one of the directors and owners of Careline Services, we actually had a business problem. It was one of those kind of classic situations. So what happened was there was this new security standard that came along called PCI, where you had to show and put in place a lot of protection if you were going to be handling customers' credit card details. So we were a smaller company in the grand scheme of the industry, a few million turnover at that time, but small in comparison to others. So we had to therefore comply with 300 security controls, and then it was going to be like a night and day. 1 minute you didn't have to, then if you wanted to carry on processing credit cards, you had to comply with these standards. So one of my colleagues, one of the other directors, came up with this concept that actually to do that, we could, it's quite a technical thing as you can imagine, but the idea was that customers would use their keypad in order to input the credit card details. So that in itself wasn't the key revolution, because that was being done if you think about how IVRs work, when you're calling a call center. So that was part one. But the second part, which was the key thing that we could patent, was that you can mask the tone. So when you press the button, it makes a noise. Mm-hmm. Those noises, if you had a call recording, you could actually decipher what the numbers are by the tone. So by masking it, so in other words, making it a bland, everyone sounds the same and it isn't correlated to a number, that then meant that if you had 10,000 people on your call recordings that had all put their tones in, you couldn't actually work out what their credit card details were. So that's actually the crucial part of that concept. So then obviously, at first you didn't know what we were onto, so we just thought, aren't we clever? Because we now don't have to comply with what happened was you don't have to comply with about 290 things because we don't actually have the data. Yeah, because the data doesn't exist because we've masked it in a very layman's terms. So therefore, we were all pleased with ourselves because we could carry on business and carry on handling credit card details. It then obviously really dawned on us that there was an opportunity to sell this to other companies. And what we did as a team was that we spun it out as a separate company. We put in place a management team, and we did the very much the entrepreneurial route with that business in terms of we got funding from venture capital. And I can't take credit for the amazing success from that point forward. It had a brilliant management team and did very, very well. But it was great to be there in the early days, putting it together and kind of helping get it moving.
You mentioned your father in terms of his business experience, if you like, in the trades. But had you always felt you had this sort of entrepreneurial spirit that sort of lurked in the background, and it was an itch that you needed to scratch for some time?
Yes, no, definitely. But I did actually take quite a lot of time in sense of really breaking out. I'm now with a co-founder, so I don't think you have to be on your own to be an entrepreneur. Obviously, you can be part of a team, or you could be an individual. Clearly, so what I mean by that is that in these early days, yes, I was an owner and a shareholder, and we were entrepreneurial in nature. But I didn't feel at that stage I was the lead founder. I was very much part of an ownership quorum. Whereas, if you like, Limitless was what I felt was my and Megan, our first true entrepreneurial business. So we had the benefit of being with others and having that entrepreneurial spirit and ownership and selling those businesses. But Limitless was the kind of coming of the age, if you like, for the two of us. And it's been really exciting from the point we decided that we wanted to create Limitless to where we are today.
So before we go into Limitless, I guess the same question in terms of learning that I mentioned earlier, if you like, but in terms of what you learned from that that semaphone experience. How would you describe that?
Yeah, so I think what I would say is I'll draw a line between two things. As I mentioned, we put in place a management team, and I wouldn't want to take any at all zero credit for the brilliance that they and how they grew the business. From my perspective, purely looking in as one of the original founders, would be just around how you can develop the product and how the product gets developed and the nature of that. So what I mean by that is you really clearly need to create a very flexible kind of product. And it was the changing from an on-premise to cloud. And hindsight's a wonderful thing, 2020 vision. So in other words, it was started very much as an on-premise because that was the way it was. And it needed to get to cloud faster. But hey, I'll just couch my learning there in that it's easy for someone to look in from outside than to actually be there and have to make those decisions. But I think that would be one thing, if I could say as a shareholder, I think the acceleration from that on-premise to cloud would have given it the maximum ability to grow faster and faster.
So let's talk about Limitless. So what was the inspiration behind Limitless?
Well, quite a few things. Obviously, having worked in the call center industry for 20 years, we had an appreciation. And the way I like to think about it is from an entrepreneurial perspective in terms of where there would be growth and value. And then equally, what are the problems and the challenges that need to be solved? And if the two things could then actually come together, then you think, well, we could be onto something. So where was the growth? Where was the value? Where could we see in 2015 when we were thinking about it? Where would the growth be? So we could see that the way people work was changing. It was being talked about at that stage, the future of work still is, and it's still evolving clearly at a rapid rate. But pre the pandemic, it was all about, could we get more fluidity in our workforce? Could we get more agility? People are looking at freelancing, and there's a real growth in this. And then Uber was growing fast, but it was still only 5 or 6 years in. It was nowhere near what it is today, even back then. So we were fascinated by that. The second thing is that in our world of customer service and experience, so everybody listening that's a consumer can just think, well, how do I interact with an organization? Was it an email? Is it a phone call? Or is it what we call a chat session where you're messaging back and forth? And how is that going to evolve? And what we can see in the industry perspective is that there was both a push and a pull. In other words, the push was it was cost effective for companies to be able to provide more digital support rather than have to do call center voice support, so telephone support. But also the pull was actually consumers said, well, if you can actually interact fast and resolve my inquiries via messaging, I'm actually happy. And I think it's the same concept of when, I have to admit, in the 90s when people started texting, I thought, why would I want to text someone? I just call someone. Anyway, the rest is history. And I am a proponent of the ping someone a message rather than have to call. So we all are, aren't we? But the point is that we could see that growth. The third thing was just automation. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and automation. And what we could see that there was a real opportunity for, and this is 6-7 years ago, and it's being talked about more, but then it wasn't. It was about how AI was going to replace humans. And obviously, there's still that discussion going on. But what we could see was actually there's a way for automation and AI to augment people, to be able to help them to do a better job, better being faster, slicker, smarter, more efficient, whatever. But nevertheless, we could see how that AI and automation could help in the world of customer experience and service to enable people to respond to customer inquiries faster and more accurately and more efficiently. So those were the three things. And then from the problems, the big challenges, what a consumer would articulate is, mediocre, inconsistent, long queue times. How would you articulate your experience of customer service? So they were obviously the problems that you want to overcome. But actually, what were the symptoms, the challenges, if you actually know what causes that? Well, it's the kind of inflexibility and the lack of agility that you have in the employee call center model. And because of shifts in schedules, you're scheduling people weeks in advance because you have to give notice. you're effectively guessing how, I use the word a little bit liberally because people wouldn't like to think it's guessing, but effectively you're guessing how much volume is going to come in 2 weeks' time, and you're trying to match it with enough people at that hour, at that minute. So effectively it's like, even though, again, there's a whole industry in which is called workforce management, which would tell you the contrary, I can tell you now, effectively, it's like a 40 clock. You're right once a day, and then everything else, you're either lucky or unlucky. And I lots of people in the industry might be disagreeing with me, but I think it's fairly true. So anyway, long story short is that this agility and flexibility of that model, it's really hard to provide great customer service, which effectively is not just accurate answers and resolution to your inquiry as a customer, but fast and prompt, and where you don't have to go through a myriad of layers to get there. So that's one. The second is attrition and turnover of staff. That's a symptom that causes this mediocre, inconsistent service. So if you could just imagine an industry that does have 100% turnover, so you have 1,000 people working in a call center, you will have 1,000 different people working there a year later. Now, obviously, it's not. It's because actually some of them spin over a number of times. I'm not suggesting that a whole 1,000 leave, but effectively 100% attrition. So all that knowledge and learning, let alone the cost, but the knowledge and learning, you effectively only ever have people with about a 6-month, kind of 12-month tenure. And that obviously has an effect on knowledge and quality. And then finally, which again is another symptom, is low pay. So everybody, minimum wage, living wage the world over. And the problem in the industry is because of the way that it's consolidated, the sale of all the call centers, smaller ones, into these big, large billion-dollar organizations, it's kind of a race to the bottom commodity, low price. And then the lower the price, the impact inevitably has on people's pay. You saw, again, like wage arbitration in the industry in terms of people moving offshore. Again, that was all to find this kind of race to the bottom. But even when I talk about pay, I talk about pay in Manila, in Bangalore, in Sao Paulo, in New York. In other words, pay is low wherever you are. It's lower, obviously, from an arbitration, wage arbitrage perspective, but it's still lower than you would want to pay those people. So those are the three big things, the big challenges: the attrition, the low pay, and this kind of inflexibility and lack of agility of a workforce. How can we overcome that?
Yeah, that's going to be my next question. I guess, what was the vision you set out to achieve?
Yeah, so the vision that we set out to achieve was that, we were inspired by companies like eBay, Airbnb, Uber, and what inspired us about those. Also in other companies called, less well known, but Lithium, which have communities and forums. Also giffgaff, which is, as we know, and how they were using some of their community to support other members. So we had all these inspirational ideas that effectively we felt that wouldn't it be possible and amazing if you could actually get really knowledgeable product users who are enthusiastic advocates of brands and products, who know they use them every day, and give them the ability to support other customers and resolve their inquiries. So that was the genesis of it. And, we then looked at eBay and thought, well, how have you built a trust between buyer and seller, billions of transactions? And then Uber and Airbnb and they're marketplaces in the sense that you've got the buyer, the seller, the driver, the rider, etc., and you've got the company involved there as well. So we were fascinated by that, and then we were looking, well, what makes it work? And there are lots of things, but ultimately you've got a rating system which is inspiring people to make sure that they're delivering the best quality of service to the end user all the time. That doesn't exist in the world of call centers and customer service. So we thought, this is something that's really interesting. And then rewards and routing are key parts of those marketplaces. Of rewards in terms of how much you pay and making sure they can earn really good money, and they can earn on demand, so they can earn fast. And routing is all about making sure you're getting the right, in our world, it's getting the right inquiry to the person that knows the answer. In Uber, obviously, you can imagine what routing is there. So that really inspired us. That gave us the idea. Lithium is a community forum, and giffgaff kind of use a community forum concept to support their customers in the mobile phone industry. So what inspired us there was that we felt that in those community forums, when it's kind of like a version of what Limitless is, but you go there and if one customer is asking a question, another customer is answering it, and it's the right answer, that's a great thing. That works. The problem, though, that we felt, it wasn't scalable, wasn't reliable, couldn't be trusted, wasn't fast, wasn't one-to-one. And therefore, if we went to enterprise clients and said, we're going to replace your call center with a community forum, well, that's been tried for 20 years and it hasn't done that, right? Community forums are about a couple of % of the overall volume. The rest is all dealt with by agents. So we said, well, if we could make this concept of community and forum, if you could trust that the answers would be accurate, high quality, on brand, if you could trust that they would be fast answers, and you could do that in the channels that your customers are communicating to your agents in, would you buy that? And that was effectively what Limitless was, the ability for customers to crowdsource, to build crowds of customers who are onboarded onto our platform, who earn money on demand for providing great customer service. But they do so in those channels. They do it one-to-one. And it's an alternative to having an agent, is to having an expert on our platform.
So what were some of the challenges that you faced in those early days, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think, there are lots of different things on personal and business level. So I talk about funding as a challenge because it is for any company. But to be honest, we did pretty well at that. We went out to angel investors, which is the norm, people that knew us from the industry, because we had no product. We just had an idea. And then they had to trust us, Megan and I, and they had to believe in the idea. So obviously that's what we pitched them. And we got about £800,000, so 600,000 from angel investors, and we got a couple of 100,000 from Unilever, who was going to be our first client. And we sold to Unilever effectively thin air. In other words, we said, if we build this product, would you pilot? Would you trial it? They said they would. Their ventures arm got wind of this and said, well, what is this thing? We explained. And they said, well, we'll give you a check for a couple of £100,000. A small check in the world, but it gets you started. That enabled us to build the platform and build the concept. So those were challenges that, you face. I think things that when you first start, the kind of product life cycles, you're looking for those kind of early adopters, evangelists, and looking back, they can often be in lots of different industries. And that's because we're relying on people that we've known from our last 20 years of experience, and people that are wanting and willing to try something completely new. What I mean by that is that when later on in your cycle, you then have to pick, well, you don't have to, but I strongly advise that you have a go-to-market strategy which really focuses on securing a beachhead in a particular market with a particular what we call use case. And then you focus all of your attention at that. And the reason for that is because you're not big enough to do everything, and the market is not necessarily ready. And effectively, what is your go-to-market choice should be, in layman's terms, the lowest hanging fruit. What can you sell? What will they buy? How can you reference that? Because they're going to need referencing from other clients that look alike, look similar to them. So not having that in the early days, but it's a catch-22 because you can't easily have a go-to-market until you've actually launched and learned what is going to be the best use case, and you've actually got some reference clients to pick one of those or two of those to be your references for your go-to-market. So it's kind of getting to that point, it was a pivotal moment that when we had the ability to pick our strategy, that we've seen some real fast success and faster growth since then. I think one other thing, so many things, but one thing to call out, which is a challenge, is just, despite obviously coming out continually knocks and having to pick yourself up, there are little bumps in the road, which now seem minor, but at the time seem monumental. So that tenacity, that will to carry on. But I think the other is when you're small, and if you're in B2B as opposed to B2C. So in B2B, we're selling to big enterprises. Our client list now are companies like Microsoft and eBay, Unilever, L'Oreal, Dell, Sony. I mean, it's just really big clients. When you're small, you don't have many people, and they can consume you because they've got so many people, legal teams, HR teams, operational teams, just teams everywhere. And they're all focused on being brilliant at what they do. And then if you can imagine, you've got to match up to those people. And it's really hard at the early days They want what you've got and they'll consume as much as you give them. And that's really hard. So I couldn't give great advice, but you just got to get through that. I think the advice would be obviously prioritization and picking and thinking about, you don't spread yourself too thinly. Obvious things to say, but in hindsight. And what I would say to anyone that's from the perspective of thinking about from an entrepreneurial perspective or in the middle of this or at the early stages is that it does get better. And as you can build out your team and build in your management team and get more critical mass, you can begin to rely more and get more expertise in. A lot falls on the founder's shoulders in the early days because you tend to have to hire the roles that are sort of junior to support the founders. And then as your time goes on, they become the sort of next tier and you recruit under them. But also you can bring in a few more senior individuals to kind of share the load. So it's kind of like coming from both angles.
What do you see as the benefits of working alongside a co-founder?
Well, for me, I couldn't do it on my own because it's complementary skills. So what I would say there is that my skills, for the purpose of this, is around commercial and sales and growth. I'm fascinated and love that side of the business, the numbers and selling and how we productize things, how we market things. And I wouldn't say that Megan doesn't equally have an interest there, but she is absolutely brilliant at managing people, developing people, running operational teams, running technology teams. She is the engine room, the deliverer, and she gets everybody else delivering. And therefore, the two of us really kind of, if you think about how you grow a company, you're going to need those kinds of skill sets. I think we're very lucky. We met each other 20 odd years ago, and therefore we've actually worked together for over 20 years. And it's just what you have to have. And it's really tough to ask yourself because often you think you've got it, but you may be kidding yourself. So you really have to ask yourself these questions. Do you have that complementary skill set, or is there going to be conflict between you? Because if you've got the complementary skill set, what that will tend to lead to is that lovely you have that mutual respect. In other words, I'm not good at what she's good at and she respects me for what I'm good at. And then obviously time gives you trust. And someone who was one of our chairman, who was also one of the team back at Careline, one of the founders of Semaphone, so again, on this journey with us, Charles Cooper Driver, he said, you can really trust someone when they speak as one for you in a negotiation. So if you're thinking about, in a business and you're talking with investors and then you are talking. So I think that's what Megan and I have too. So when I say I speak for her, I speak for her best interest, and she would have my best interest. And then when you know that, you might layman's terms say, you got each other's back. But I think that's important. So that's why. And then what you get from that, of course, is inspiration from the other person. You can get the sounding board, and you can have that moral support, and that actually not to be underestimated because it's very easy to have the imposter syndrome. To be a good entrepreneur, you have to be completely paranoid, but I think it can be really damaging to your well-being. So actually having somebody else that can be that venting, that sounding board, that person that you can have the conversation that you can't just have with anybody else, all of those things. It can go badly wrong though, as you know, I'm sure why you asked the question, but if you truly have that, then you're very lucky.
Was there you alluded to, for example, the Unilever Ventures, and the angel investors that you attracted from the outset, which of themselves would have been instrumental. But was there a sort of eureka moment where you thought, hey, we're really onto something here, and therefore, whilst the inevitable blood, sweat and tears will continue, but that actually there's a real opportunity for us?
I think, there are lots of different little eureka moments because, of course, I mentioned about attracting the money. So, wow, we can actually do this and we can convince people to do it. Our market research where we said, we're going to build this, would you buy it? And they also told us, yes, but only if you can protect the data, only if you can make sure that you protect our brand and provide really high quality. Those three things are still the same today. Every company needs those things. So that was really helpful market research because we had to build that in, not just the answers. We had to make sure that we could deliver that from day one. Otherwise, no one was going to buy the solution. I think, imagine if you had this idea that you were going to crowdsource, like our idea, Limitless Crowd, you were going to crowdsource customer service to people that you've never met, that you don't know, and they were going to then speak on behalf of that brand to another customer, and they're going to help them and resolve that inquiry. Now, I can tell you that day one, it was all hypothetical. It'd never been done before. So when we launched with Unilever, we had some really strong controls in place where we were able to check what was going on and stop something, literally in its tracks. Of course, we put in those controls, but nevertheless, we were watching from within lovely could call it a control center, but in our very little small office that we were sharing with someone else that let us borrow their office to start with, and we're just watching. And then the first question came in, and then we could see the first answer come from a person that none of us had ever met before. And effectively it got resolved, and the person used the knowledge base to help them, and they crafted a great answer, and the rest is history. So that was clearly a eureka moment. That first week. And it's funny, we handle millions of inquiries now, but the first week we handled 15 in a whole week. I think we got paid probably about £50 for that first week of revenue. It was a slow start, but it was fascinating. So a big eureka moment. I think I could tell you lots of others. I'll tell you one more. When you can sell to Microsofts and eBays, you should be on the right track at this point. So that would be a eureka moment, because in the world that we used to live in, the world of providing call center services to enterprise clients, you clearly have your crown jewel customers, and who are those big organizations around the world. And they obviously are looking for the very best vendors, the very best solutions. And it's all thinking about the future and the strategy. So it's for them to lean in and believe that this was the future of CX and the future of work. That was 4 years ago for Microsoft, and it's been a great journey. 2 years ago for eBay, been a great journey so far. I think they're the other big moments that you really do think, wow. There were others where Gartner start recognizing you. McKinsey wrote an article on Gig CX, which Megan and I, coined the term Gig CX, which we've trademarked since. But McKinsey wrote an article on the inevitable growth of Gig CX. Those are, lovely little things. Forbes article last year. Lots of little moments. But I think the thing that matters most is that, actually there is one other, is we do these little videos where we ask the experts to tell us what attracted them to Limitless and why do they do this and what do they spend their money on once they earn for Limitless. That actually is huge, because you listen to them and it just makes you, in some ways, heart melt, but equally it just makes you feel good inside, because the story is often they couldn't find work, they couldn't do work in another way because of these different reasons. They just love the flexibility of working in this way, and then they sort of 9 out of 10 say, well, why do you do this? What do you spend the money on? And what's lovely is they all have a reason. It's a wedding, it's a holiday, it's like a university course, it's a car, it's my bike's gone wrong and I need to fix it. And it's lovely because you just think, wow, we're helping people earn that little extra money on the side, that side hustle that's going to actually make a difference to them. Of course, that's great from a business model perspective, because everybody knows that if you're doing something with a goal in mind, it makes you quite sticky. So that's great too. It's good to hear, but it's equally nice to know it's actually making an impact.
So what excites you about the future for Limitless?
I think clearly entrepreneurs, there's always the value. You want to build a successful company, but I think the thing that drives Megan and I is because we've been in our industry for so long, just near 20 years before we founded Limitless, we want to help transform an industry for the better and be recognized for being a catalyst that people that help to do that, to help to change how customer service is delivered, and basically make it better for the customer, the end customer, make it better for the people that provide the service and better for the companies, make it even more easy for them. And actually to to be successful in the space and to transform an industry is that kind of person, because it's mildly an ego thing, right? As in it drives you to think, we can change this, the two of us, we obviously, now as a business, we being Limitless, we can change this. And I think that's big. I would also say it's to change how people work for the better and to really turn it on its head and to take what was quite a hypothetical scientific, would it work approach to actually reality, which what I mean by this is the concept is I'm an employer, I'm going to offer you work, you're going to commit to these schedules, you're going to come and you're going to work this way. And then getting the output that you got, which was the call center, inconsistent quality, mediocre turnover of staff and everything else, turn that on its head and say, I've got work. Do you want to come and do it for me? And you can choose how much you do, when you do it, where you do it, your terms. In other words, we call it turning work on its head. Now, the fascinating thing that really gets me here is that imagine your motivation as a human on those two sides. I'm going to work today because I have to, I've got this schedule, I've got this shift. You kind of have to, or you're going to lose your job. We understand that. It's how work's always been. Okay, so now you're with Limitless. Do I want to do this today? Am I in the right frame of mind to provide amazing service? Because I know I need to, because I'm going to be rated every time, just like Uber and Airbnb and eBay, right? So it's a different thing. But when I come, I'm bringing my A game because I want to be there. I've chosen to be there. And everything else you can imagine from that. That fascinates me. So where I see the future is, is obviously helping to change the industry for the better, but also to change the way people work. And I also think Limitless can evolve horizontally outside of just pure kind of call center, what you would see as alternative to call center. So there's lots of other, I think, applications where the gig economy, we may not do them all at Limitless, but I think we would see ourselves as a future important platform in the gig economy.
It was going to be my next question as to what do you plan for Limitless to achieve? But is that transforming the world of work, if you like? I'm trying to put words in your mouth, but that transformation of what work is and how we work, is that a bigger vision that you aspire to?
Yes, I think we definitely do. Our vision is as a business that we want to enable everyone in the world to be able to provide money for providing great customer service for the brands they love. And it's quite a big statement in that we see it as global, we see it as being very large. Key point about providing amazing service and earning money and earning it on demand, so on your own terms. So I think literally transforming it, what we want to achieve. I think I want to Megan and I want to make sure that we achieve a really strong, sustainable business for the future. One that's going to be around a long time, and therefore I think it's not just going to plateau at just customer service. For example, I think there's lots more. It can move into marketing and advertising. So one of the things that we're working with Facebook and others on at the moment is, wouldn't it be amazing that if you had your advertising, but then you could link the opportunity for people that see those adverts to actually communicate a message with people that own those products and services in real time via messaging. So imagine taking the world of kind of ratings and reviews but making it a live experience and doing it in a way that's sort of curated and safe and trusted, so you don't lose that authenticity and trust. So you can see how there could be different ways of applying this and doing that. So we want it to be sustainable. I think we want entrepreneurs and people that employ people, definitely the two of us, we want to see, honestly, people develop in their careers. That is something we're quite passionate about. So when we talk about that changing how people get paid in the call center industry, we used to employ 2,000 people and they were pretty much on minimum living wage as call center agents. And we couldn't pay them more, because if we did, we'd be actually out of business, because the profit margins in that space were an EBITDA of 5 to 10%. It was literally negligible. So you're completely confined. So breaking that model is what we wanted to do with Limitless, because we were passionate that it's unfair the way it is. So I think that is something that we want to achieve, which is paying people more for providing great customer service. So I think that's an inner goal and inner drive, because there's one thing that we didn't like about our old world was that we were disappointed in ourselves. Yeah. So we don't want to be disappointed in ourselves, in terms of what we can achieve with Limitless. In terms of the size and scale, you wouldn't be a founder, in this world and have a name like Limitless as a company. But we do want to be a UK founded tech unicorn, and we want to do it in 5 years. And we think we can. We think it's a huge market. It's a $300 billion market, the world of customer experience and CX. And the world is beginning to lean in. And now the market really does feel right. As I say, the analysts are talking about the market that we've created. McKinsey and others are all talking about it. Major clients, as I've mentioned, that are working with us. So I really think the world is our oyster. We've obviously got to execute well, keep our feet on the ground, but I think we're in a good place.
You've been described as an outspoken proponent of digital ethics, workers' rights, and the good gig, which encapsulates gig work for incremental pay versus full-time work, skill gig work, no unpaid time, downtime, and zero expenses. I think I read that right. And what was it that inspired you to get involved in these issues? I
just passionately believe that gig can be a force for good, and actually it doesn't have to be a negative thing. Now, there are ways to do this and to provide people the opportunity to earn money on their own terms. And that's really important, right? So what we do when we're asking our experts who work on the platform what matters to them, they love the flexibility. They love the fact that they get paid on demand. What does that mean? It means that they do some work. Once that gets quality, it goes through a quality control process, but this is minutes, not days. Then their balance will increase by the amount they've earned, and they can take that out immediately. So they love that. They love the fact that there's very low barriers to entry. So what that means is that they have their own knowledge and skill. We check that that is the right knowledge and skill when they come onto the platform. But if it is, effectively, that's a low barrier to entry because they already have that knowledge. The second is that they only need a mobile phone, tablet, or a laptop PC to work on the platform. That's it. Then the rest is about them just spending their own time when they want to, earning money. So all of those things, I think, sound very good to me. They sound very positive. I think you need to be careful that people don't become dependent. I mean, there's lots of things, so I can't cover them all. But one of the challenges, I think, in certain platforms on the gig economy is people become a bit dependent on them. It's a replacement for full-time work. When that happens, dependency links into loans and mortgages and everything else, and we all know what that means. That is a really difficult area to be in at this stage in the gig economy. So what we do, we're looking for people to do little and often. Maybe they earn £5,000 to £6,000 extra a year. They're doing 5 or 6 hours a week in order to do that. That's what I call healthy way for the platform to be operating. And we're also completely behind the fact that I believe that the industry and governments will regulate. Can't wait for them to do so, because actually it's the model that we offer is the agility, the flexibility, and the ability to do things on demand. The costs that would be layered back, or any incremental cost that might come through some kind of regulation, could not still be what they would be if you had to do work to provide this in a different way. In other words, bricks and mortar, lots of different systems and just the model itself is very different, and that's what gives it the efficiency and the flexibility. So through regulation, whatever that might be deemed, by the powers in each of the jurisdictions, we operate globally, so it's going to be quite challenging for us because it'll be different everywhere, I'm sure, but hopefully there'll be some consistency in the major markets. That actually will be very, very beneficial for us when that happens.
How do you see the future of the work, not necessarily the workplace, but work itself? How do you see work evolving? Because I think, to your point, the gig economy, it's not new, but it strikes me that the traditional approach to working, our understanding of what work is deeply rooted. It's been around for hundreds of years, since arguably the Industrial Revolution. The sort of principles of a time of day through which we work, we go to this place we call work. If that was evolving dramatically, I think the pandemic undeniably has accelerated that evolution. But I'm interested in your view as to how you see the future of work evolving. Do you see the gig economy, if you like, whilst changing, evolving, attracting regulation, whatever structures might be, but actually that is the direction of travel, that we want this flexibility and the ability to work on our terms?
We definitely do. I do think that this, it was a good word about a year ago now, it's overused, but hybrid. But, it is We need to find another, but it is effectively. I see an ecosystem in terms of how work is delivered for organisations. Clearly, there's going to be work that's manual. There's going to be work that you need to be in a particular location, because we're talking about all work. But I think as a principles at the highest level is people are going to want more agility, more flexibility, definitely where they can to work wherever they want to work. But even if they have to work in a particular location, I think it's still flexibility and agility. I think they're going to be the key things. Now, hopefully that can work for both the employer and the employee or the worker. That's how I see it moving. And what I mean in our space, in the world of kind of CX and call centers and everything else, I would see there's still going to be call center agents as we know them today. There's still going to be people that are maybe working on shifts and schedules, on being paid hourly, that actually could work from a known location, like at home. And then there's going to be the gig economy, which is what Limitless is all about. And it's going to be an ecosystem. We're not going to take over 100%, but there's going to be, from a standing start of 0, 10, 20, 30, 40% will become sort of gig work in that space. And that's because of, obviously, the flexibility it gives and all the benefits that I've mentioned. I think a couple of challenges we're facing is we've got some really experienced people that work for us that have 10, 20 years of experience in what they're in their field. But the young people that are starting with us, I think that's where there's going to be a big challenge to overcome. How do you onboard? How do you create that kind of team ethos, water cooler moments? There's that. Everything says, team call after team's call, where there's not a lot of building of that kind of camaraderie. And I think in terms of developing young people, that's an area, I don't have all the answers, but, I think that's a real challenge that I'm worried about. How does that happen? I'm worried about it because I'm a father and I've got boys that are 12 and 9 years old. And how are they going to find work in the future? When I say find work, I find the experience of work.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think back to those relationships that you form in those early stages in your career, and actually the informality of learning that the workplace affords us, as much as the formal training that we all but many of us enjoy. But actually, it's those learned behaviours and also know how not to behave oftentimes, as much as how to behave, and how to get the best from people and with people. I think all those sorts of things. How you do that remotely, how technology accelerates that learning. I don't know what the answer is to that. I'm with you. How you build culture, as a business leader, as a founder, how you build a culture, develop a culture remotely. I mean, there are businesses that have done it, right? But how you do it successfully, I'm not sure. What about technology, Roger? What excites you, or what developments in technology are you really excited by?
I think as it relates into my particular area, it's probably the most relevant to talk about would be obviously the latest metaverse, if you like, and augmented reality, and how that is going to impact how we work. Funny enough, in terms of the future of work, but how the future of how we buy, how things are bought and sold, the future of customer service. Therefore, where does that fit in to that spectrum? So that's something I'm interested in. I'm obviously interested in from a Limitless perspective as well, in terms of how crowds of people. Where could it be just training, the systems behind augmented reality, or could it be in effect the developers building it? Think about the kinds of ways that you could tap into the gig economy for various types of resources. Yes, but equally, how could it potentially support in the buying process? And I don't have the answers there, but that's a particular area that I think is exciting. I think what we're doing is around using AI to augment people to be able to provide faster, more accurate, better answers. So what that means is through our platform, you've got all these millions of inquiries that come in, and you've got people that are experts at resolving them. And those experts, by the way, they have their own native knowledge of using products and services that they're helping. They also have support of knowledge bases. By the way, those knowledge bases are exactly the same as the agents in the call center have. So they have the same repositories, if you like, of materials to call upon. In other words, I think you resolve this particular in issue on Office 365 this way, but I'm actually going to just check that in my, yes, that's exactly. And then I can use some of that material, and I can use my own knowledge, and I can embellish that with empathy because I've actually experienced the same issue and I've resolved it on my laptop. So coming back to that, the point is all of the inquiries effectively, we're learning from those, and then we're able to use what we call AI, well, the AI to use what we call suggested answers, in order that the next time the inquiry comes in, we're saying to the experts who are working on the platform, this might be the right answer to this inquiry that's coming in, or it might be the right topic that you need to look at and research in the knowledge. In other words, it's helping them, point them in the right direction. Now, Why is that important? Because if they can do it faster, it means they could earn more money. And if they can earn more money, it goes to our overarching goal that we want them to be able to earn more money than they could in the call center. So that's really good. So it's driving their ability. The second is if it can improve the accuracy, that improves the customer experience, means that the customers are happier. That is a virtuous flywheel for us, because if the experts are happy and answering questions and earning more money, the customers are happy, that you can then tell the clients will be happy, they'll give us more work. So a little thing, Matt, is the whole flywheel.
Let's look again at your own career. Who's been the greatest influence on your career and why?
That one is quite easy. I've had the benefit of working with a person. I met so many different people who I think is the best business person I've ever worked with, which is a guy called Charles Cooper Driver. He was the original founder of the Careline Services business, which I then became a director and owner of, and he was one of the team at Semaphone. He's the chairperson of Limitless, and he's just been inspirational. He's been very supportive, respect and trust, mentor, but he'd kill me if I say kind of father figure in that sense. But he's really helped me because he's been willing to call me out and to challenge, and we have some lovely big arguments continuously, but we kind of enjoy the debate, right? Because we're just fiercely, love a challenge and love a debate. So it's definitely Charles for me. I mean, Megan, I would be wrong with me to say in terms of, and I'm not just saying it now as a second, but clearly Megan, but I think Megan might also pick Charles. so because he's been a key part in both of our careers and our lives. So he's very inspirational.
So to who do you admire and why?
So without repeating Charles, because there's admiration there, and Megan, who I've already spoken about, I think for myself, my father, just a good family man and good husband and a good father. Yeah.
In terms of what drives you, how would you describe that?
I think I just have this inbuilt tenacity, energy, and will to win. And sometimes I'm saying those things, you just feel that other people kind of say those things, but I think that's probably, I hope and think that's what others might say about me. And I think you need it to be an entrepreneur, to be honest. Looking back over the last 7 years, you've got to have that resilience, that bounce back ability, that just sheer perseverance, never take no for an answer. I think the one you didn't ask me, but a bit of advice I'd give is that to myself and to others would always be, I've learned that sometimes patience is required, and especially if you're thinking about enterprise sales, right? And we found that because people we spoke to a couple of years ago you're so desperate because you're growing your company, you want them to do business with you now, but actually they've come back. And one of the things which is lovely that I can now help with my sales team is when they're having that same frustration, I can say, let's just ease off, let's be patient, let's keep educating, keep giving them information, because they've shown an interest, they'll come back because they have to come back because this is the way the industry's going. And actually, that's really helpful, I'm sure, to them as individuals, because it's pressurized world sales. So if you have someone that says, in these circumstances, let's just ease off, it will come good. And then, we've seen that with a few clients that have come back to us this year who are just major, huge organizations that we were frustrated that didn't buy a year or so ago, but now they're buying.
I think you make a really good point around patience. It's not often something that I hear reflected upon, but nevertheless, I think if we look at what the headlines would afford us, we're all led to believe of the overnight success is the common theme, right? The reality is rarely does that happen. Hence why they make the headlines. But actually, you need that patience if you're going to succeed. I'm
giving it as my advice. I find it hard to follow my own advice because I want everything tomorrow. I mean, it's a yin and a yang, right? If you're too patient, you're not an entrepreneur that's going anywhere. But equally, you have to know, it's about that kind of of putting your foot on the pedal and taking it off the pedal. And that's patience at the right moment. Maybe that's the right definition. Because otherwise things don't get done sometimes if you don't have the force to push them through. But you've got to know when to do that. And by the way, you'll still keep making mistakes and keep thinking 2020 afterwards vision that you didn't have the patience you needed. But self-awareness, right? At least if you can be aware, you can think about it.
So what does success mean to you?
I think we kind of summarised a few of the different things, but in short, I think things we've discussed are changing the industry, as I mentioned. I think creating a sustainable business, and what I mean, yes, in terms of green and various things that we're looking at to doing, and our model and the gig economy actually does support that. If you think about you don't have to travel, you can be at home, and you don't have to be consuming lots of energy in big buildings, etc., etc. So there's quite a few benefits there, but I actually meant sustainable in terms of the long term, not just in order to create some value, to sell a business and to move on and that business not be successful. No, I want Limitless to be a large company, a successful company, a company that is around in 20, 30, 40 years. Sadly, without myself, necessarily there, but, hopefully some kind of legacy around the good gig and the things that we stand for and why we founded the business. So some key principles for good, but, that's definitely something I would love to achieve personally. And then helping people in their careers, we've always been doing that, because we've been employers, and we've got people that have come, many new people that work for us at Limitless that we've never worked with before, but we've also got lots of people that have come back that have worked for us at different times over our career over the last 25 years. And, sometimes sadly, people come in, they do 2 or 3 years, and then they go on. We often have, not often in terms of lots of turnover stuff, but when people do that, and they're always going to do that, I think they're often surprised that we want the best for them. But if they're taking a step up, they've managed to do something and build something that's helped them take another jump that we're not ready to give them or can't give them, or it's into a slightly different space, then that actually really pleases me. And I know it does Megan too.
What about away from Limitless, Roger? You mentioned you've got a couple of children, but I'm sure that they will occupy a lot of your time. But do you get a chance to unwind and relax, and how do you do so? Honestly,
no. And that's actually an area I've got to work on for my own well-being. So, without going too far into it, but, sleep, it can be difficult, and finding times to switch off. So what I would say is recently I went away on holiday with just my wife. It was her 40th birthday, and I said to Megan, this is a holiday where I need to actually switch off. So you can contact me on WhatsApp if it's an emergency. And I never do this, right? I'm always online. And actually, it was good. I'm pretty sharing into it in as much as that it was great to have that time. But all of that time, I didn't know what to do with. And actually, it made me quite sad. It made me realize that everything is so all-consuming that I do need to find time and compartmentalize. And that would be advice I would give anyone for their own well-being and sanity. Mm. And also, it's going to make you better, more efficient and more productive, I'm sure. But it is really hard when you're growing a company to switch off. You feel that it's 24/7, because it is. But if you don't, it's only so long the fuse will burn for.
And I think that's the bit that oftentimes doesn't get mentioned. The perception is running your own business, glamorous lifestyle. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. It's all consuming. It's 24/7. You try and then balance that out with a family life. These are all consistent themes with every founder with whom I've engaged. But there is that recognition and understanding amongst that founder community that you sacrifice a lot in order to succeed. So I think it's right that you should raise it. It's a really valid point.
No, I think if there's anything to come from that, then I think we all need to do the very best you can, because you need to do the best for yourself, but also your family or whoever you care about that's in your life. And I think well-being is a topic that we're quite hot on at Limitless. Do the very best we can to make sure people switch off If they're not well, they take the time to recover and all those things. And, it's hard in a pressurized growth, and also the kinds of people that often work for startups and high growth companies, they're very passionate, loyal. They can be loyal and passionate, not just to the founders, but to the concept, the business that they signed up for, the vision, because the vision is at its most prevalent when you first start. If you think about some of the other companies that we know, their founders had a great vision, and 20 years on, it's moved a little bit away from what it was that drove them at the start. And often some of those early, so the point is that team will overwork. They will work themselves to the bone. They will not switch off, and they're just, you'll see that, and you have to recognize that and make sure that doesn't happen.
So you mentioned patience, you mentioned switching off, and reflecting back, what advice might you give 21-year-old Roger Beadle?
Well, to be honest, I wouldn't have listened to the advice because I'd have been 21. that would be, and I'm realising that now with two boys. I appreciate they're only half that age at 12 and 9, but I'm getting to that stage already where they're not listening to dad's advice. What would I say? Do you know what? It would be the word patience that we've already discussed, because I didn't have it then at all. I think that would be one. And I think earlier on, I also mentioned around that kind of give as much as you take. And I think that is really important. You are going to have the most success if you, and it has to be sincere and genuine, but if you go into a meeting, if you go into a conversation, not just to sell, but to do anything, and they're thinking about what can I do to help you make your job easier, help you reach your objective, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be sincere. And actually, if you can do that, that would be embracing. And then patience, of course, and for all the reasons we just discussed.
So where can listeners go to find out more about Limitless?
Well, they can check out our website. So Limitless Tech, Limitless Tech, all one word, .com. And you will find all about Limitless and many of our success stories and stories and references about the work that we're doing with all of those amazing clients. Find out about the good gig as well, and what that means, and that's kind of clearly articulated what we're actually trying to achieve. Yeah, and we always, if there's anybody out there that wants to learn more, we'll love to, of course, shameless plug, but clearly we'd love to tell you and can assure you that it's completely limitless.
Fantastic. Roger, it's been great to speak with you. My huge thanks for your time. I wish you well in your unicorn endeavours, and I think that certainly I can speak on behalf of listeners who will say that they will also enjoy watching you as you continue your rise. I think it's a fabulous story and fantastic proposition, and clearly at the forefront of the direction of travel in what we see in terms of the customer experience and all those sorts of good things. So I wish you well. Really appreciate your time and insight today, and all the very best for the future.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Roger. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.